Hello and welcome to my book review. My name is Kirsten Dierolf and I review coaching literature that's recommended to me. Today I'll be talking about The Heart of Laser-Focused Coaching, a revolutionary approach to masterful coaching by Marion Franklin. The way I go about these book reviews is that I'll tell you a little bit about the author, then I will include a summary of the book, and after the summary of the book, I will evaluate the book according to a few criteria. Criteria are readability, academic rigor, and usability of the book. So stay tuned for Marion Franklin's The Heart of Laser-Focused Coaching. Marion Franklin is a highly respected master certified coach by the ICF with a career spanning over 2 decades. She has significantly influenced coaching practices through her innovative methodologies and dedication to coach development. She's been a coach forever. She's held her PCC since 1998, and she holds master's degrees both in business and education. The Heart of Laser-Focused Coaching is divided into 6 parts. First part is on the foundation of her approach, the foundation for laser-focused coaching. Then parts 2, 3, 4, and 5 are about the coaching session itself. Part 2, the beginning. Part 3, the middle. Part 4, the end. And then part 5 is about masterful coaching and the challenges. Part 6 is about moving forward, and the book also includes a sample session of a laser-focused coaching session. You know me, I am always a stickler for philosophy, so let me talk a little bit about what I perceive as the foundation for laser-focused coaching. When I read through the chapter 1 and read between the lines in the other chapters, it seems to me that Marion Franklin's approach is loosely based on cognitive behavioral coaching and ontological coaching. The core ideas of cognitive behavioral coaching are for the coach to identify and challenge unhelpful thought patterns of the client. And you see that tendency very clearly in The Heart of Laser-Focused Coaching. Right at the beginning, page 12, Marion Franklin writes, the coaching process can be broken down into 3 simple and easy steps. Identify the ideas, thoughts, or beliefs that keep your client from getting what they want. Help them shift their perspective so that they can feel good about themselves and move forward, and help them capitalize on their strengths to achieve fulfillment and their full potential. In chapters 7 and 8, she talks about understanding human behaviors and using themes to see the big picture. And here she delineates 4 boxes around valuable insights, creating connection, personal empowerment, and eliminating obstacles, where she has identified common themes. For example, valuable insight could be that a person is ambivalent or attached to the outcome, or they're carrying old messages, or they have either or thinking, expectations, etc. So here, the task of the coach is clearly to identify, I would say, the faulty thinking of the client and help them gain an awareness of this faulty thinking, or maybe even faulty feeling in the case of ambivalence. And then after having gained an awareness of that faulty thinking, overcome it by creating a new awareness with the help of the coach. This is also where I think it links with ontological coaching, where the core idea is to focus on language, emotions, and the body as domains of learning and transformation. Marion does not speak about the body a lot, but I would collect some evidence for the link to ontological coaching in the observation of linguistic patterns. For example, I have no choice or something. And her ideas that language of the client may constitute the client's reality. Marion Franklin's idea is clearly that in order to move forward, it is necessary to get to the root of the problem, which is sadly quite opposed to what we're doing in solution focused coaching, where we're saying it is important to figure out what the client really wants and where they really want to go. Curiously enough, when I look at what Marion recommends for coaches, I would agree with a lot of the practical tips that she gives. And in a sense, when Marion says that it is important not to take the client seriously, at face value, I would completely disagree. I would say it's always important to view the client as the expert for their own lives and to make sure that I believe the client in whatever they're saying. However, when I look at what she means by not taking the client seriously, um, I think I understand more of where she's going with that. So when Marion says we shouldn't believe the client, I think what she means is that when a client comes with an issue that they want resolved, there may be a bigger ask or something that is more connected to who the client is and the meaning that they're making that is connected to the issue that the client brings. And our job as coaches is to help the client explore around their topic in order to figure out what they really, really, really want. So now these are my words. I think Marion Franklin's words would be more around we need to uncover the root cause, the root emotion, the root faulty thinking. We need to help the client gain awareness of that. Once they have awareness of that, then they can move forward. So that's what I think is Marion Franklin's theoretical home. And depending on whether this is close to your heart or whether you agree more with social constructionist views, where we're saying that we absolutely have to believe the client and the client is co-constructing their world with their environment. And we are co-constructing a conversation and coaching that is supposed to be helpful. That is your choice. I just wanted to mention the differences. I'll now tell you a little bit about what Marianne Franklin says about the beginning of a coaching session. I really appreciate that Marianne also starts with not knowing. So that not knowing is what the coach starts the conversation with. And the most important element of laser focused coaching is you, is a quote that she says on page 25. And she goes into the presence of the coach and invites us to be truly listening, seeing, smelling, or tasting, and really being present with our client. She advises us to let go of the formulas and see coaching as organic in nature and invites us to reflect, ask a challenging question, share an observation, an intuition, be silent, or give some feedback, but really attune to the client rather than rely on a formula. And I really like that. I really appreciate that about this book. It seems to be really coming from a place of trying to be helpful for coaches and trying to be respectful to the client. She goes into quite some detail around the attitude of a coach: be friendly, not friends, be your own coach first, and letting go of ego as a coach. And in a sense, it's a bit ironic because on the one hand, she says, do not take your client seriously. On the other hand, on page 29, she says, your client is always right. So I think the formulation is a little bit unfortunate, but I think what she means is the right thing. So in a sense, yes, when a client comes in, for example, and says, I need to figure out what's for dinner tomorrow, we might not take the client seriously or literally and explore in the coaching session what's for dinner tomorrow, but we might explore, okay, so what makes that important for you? So that is an instance of not taking the client, I would say literally, but seriously. And It's just, I think in the book, it is formulated a little bit strangely. Chapter 3 is all around listening, and Marion explores how we listen and what helps us to listen, what gets in the way of our listening as coaches. And here you can also see this cognitive behavioral orientation, because for her, listening is about collecting data. In solution focus and in social constructionist approaches, we would say listening is something we do in order to have a good conversation with someone and in order to pick out what is important for the client. For her, I think what the client says is data, and she's always looking for something behind what the client is saying. For example, if the client is sharing an offhand remark, she would consider that as data. Another thing that Marion warns us against is getting caught up in the story of the client. So for her, it's important that coaches stay, quote unquote, neutral, and that coaches hold in mind two critical questions. Why are they telling me this, and what's making it a problem for this person? And you can see that this is a little bit linear. So as I said, we need to figure out what's the problem for the person. What is their faulty thinking? Maybe they're faulty. What are their faulty emotions in order for them to gain awareness? And with that mindset, it makes complete sense that the coach would be listening for that data. It does put the coach in a different position than we would usually position the coach in a social constructionist environment. We would be more keen on the partnering and more keen on creating a conversation together rather than putting ourselves in this kind of analytical, super neutral position where we are analyzing the client's information as data. In solution focus, we would be more about co-constructing a conversation with clients, but that's maybe the fine print. Marion literally writes on page 29, these questions, why are they telling me this, and what's making this a problem for the person, should not be articulated out loud. They're designed to help you be more curious about the person, sustain your focus, and really listen to understand what the underlying problem or faulty thinking is for your client. Marion also has some really useful chapters around language use and coaching. For example, eliminating jargon or speaking the language of the client, using silence regularly, and be empathetic, normalize clients' feelings, and creating a safe and trusting space. She makes a really useful distinction between affirming versus acknowledging. As we do, she doesn't think that cheerleading a client is really, really useful. In the chapter on setting the foundation of a coaching conversation, which is structured in the beginning, the middle, and the end, Marion structured it like this. The client comes in, tells their story, and then the coach is thinking about the first question after the client's story. And she thinks that this is really, really important. And again, makes use of these two questions. Why are they telling me this? And what makes this a problem for the client? There's some really useful advice around how to construct a good coaching agreement too. Chapter 5 is all about the art of the question, and it also includes interesting reflections on how to feedback or how to pick out useful information from what the client has been saying. So she says, be a reflector and not a parrot. And as we would also do in narrative or solution focused coaching, reflecting back to the client is about picking out what encapsulates the essence, what is important, and I think she would subscribe to our old adage of don't be a tourist in the client's life. So don't be nosy. She says nosy curiosity versus coaching curiosity. One thing I find particularly helpful is her focus on the what questions. So her examples of what do you expect to gain from this conference and how to ask open-ended questions and how to make sure that we add context to the questions. I found it really useful for her. She gives this example of a question that comes completely out of context and then is perceived as rude. So maybe I think the example she gives is somebody is folding a blanket in a certain way, and she just out of the blue asks, why are you folding this blanket this way? Which could then be perceived as rude. And had she asked, oh, I'm noticing you're folding this blanket in a very specific way. Would you mind telling me what is the advantage of it? Is a much easier question to answer. And I think that's also valid for coaching. And that's also why in coaching, we often rephrase what the client has said and then ask a question about it rather than coming out of the blue. Chapter 6 starts the discussion on the middle of the coaching question. And chapter 6 is titled Don't Believe the Client. So again, I think she doesn't mean that we don't believe the client. I think what she means by that is that we shouldn't take what they say about what they want at face value. Difference being she's looking for the underlying root cause of faulty thinking, and we would be in solution focused coaching really looking for what does the client really, really, really want and how does it connect to their lives. I don't think in practice it's very, very different, but it is a little bit of a theoretical difference. Marion seems to buy into this idea that until and unless you get to the bottom line truth for your client, you are merely providing a band-aid, is what she says on page 81 of the book. And so for her, there is a root cause, whereas in solution focus, we would say there is no root cause. It's just a story that we're making up. And what is important for us is to be telling stories in ways that make us stronger. I've already shared a little bit about chapter 7, which is on understanding human behavior, and she heavily relies on a theory here, and I'll tell you about it in a second. The name of the theory is structural alignment theory, and it says that human beings aim to be aligned with their truth, their vision, their purpose, and spirituality. This is something that you can assume about human beings. I'm not sure you have to, because it is a theory about clients, and in solution focus we're not trying to have any theories about clients. So for some people it might be very useful to be spiritual. For others it might not be useful, and we would respect whichever choice the clients are making. If you want to include a check whether the client solutions are solutions that could be viable for them, and then you want to include truth, vision, purpose, and spirituality that might be in some way useful. Again, it requires having a theory about the client, which I don't buy into. In chapter 8, we encounter the common themes in coaching, where Marion walks us through very different themes that clients could have. Let me see. I'll choose one. And for example, carrying old messages could be a theme of the client. And then we usually get an example and a sample story, and then what a coach might do and what a coach might ask once the coach has identified this theme. This does require the coach to look at the client, figure out, quote unquote, what is really going on with them, and then use the, quote unquote, appropriate coaching approach to that. Chapter 8 is on lasering in on what matters most. And invites the coach to go straight to the point. Again, who decides whether this is the point, the coach or the client? I think in the art of laser focused coaching, the coach does have a lot to say about what is underneath the client's request. Whereas in solution focused coaching, we would rely heavily on what the client says that they want, and we would trust that. Chapter 10 is on how to create shifts. And there is a quote in there that I want to read to you, where she says, studies show that 90% of people move away from pain, but only 10% of people are motivated toward pleasure. And this is not the only place where the science in the book is a little bit off, because actually there are no studies that show that, at least none that I could find. And again, I think that what Marion means by it is that it is helpful for coaches. For her, it's helpful for coaches to help clients to let go of perceived limitations. Again, who decides that this is a limitation? In Marion's book, it is the coach who actually does decide on whether it's a limitation. I'm not sure that she would actually do that, but theoretically, it's what this model entails. The book also talks about subconscious priorities and underlying beliefs, which can be in conflict with one another. And then the coach can uncover these subconscious underlying beliefs and help the client to identify their limiting idea of faulty thinking, which is a direct quote from page 157. The book then recommends a couple of strategies that coaches can use in order to help clients shift. For example, what is it costing you? Or what do you get out of thinking that you are doing this? Or other ways, reframing and other ways. Or is it possible that, and other ways of helping clients let go of their beliefs. A concept that I appreciate is Marion's concept of looping. And looping is checking in with the client and asking the client to summarize what they have gotten from the conversation this far. I also often use that just because it helps the client see what they've already discovered in the coaching situation. It helps them make an informed decision about what they want to be doing next. Chapter 11 is on moving forward and closing the conversation. And here we have all the traditional ICF competency 8 questions for ending the session: establishing support, fostering forward moving, partnering to collaborate. And again, as with the beginning, she says that it's not always clear that when we ask the client, do you want to close the session, that the client actually wants to close the session. And she invites the coach to be mindful that clients might say that they're good and use their intuition, use the coach's intuition when they feel that there might be something else that is going on. Marion also, and I would completely agree, says at the end, rather champion the client than cheerleading the client. Chapter 12 is on direct communication. If we remember the very old ICF competencies, we had a competency in there that was called direct communication, and it is about how to say things to your client, and how you can be direct in really helpful and, I would say, diplomatic way. In chapter 13, advanced coaching techniques, Marion Franklin actually mentions something like the miracle question. I'm so glad, because she has, on page 209, she has this episode or this paragraph on painting the picture. And she says painting the picture is about putting your client literally into a situation in their mind as though it's occurring right now rather than imagining it at a later time. That's a quote from page 209. And that's exactly what we do in the miracle question in solution focus. And I'm very happy that this is also in her book. She talks about using metaphors and using ways of making sure that the client actually does what they committed to do, and again mentions a few of the traditional stumbling blocks. Chapter 14 is around coaching challenges, the differentiation between therapy and coaching, what happens when you get seduced by the other person or when you identify with your client. So basically things that coaches can run into that make coaching difficult, and she provides answers to that. Chapter 15 is on communication styles and types, and it's kind of a typology of clients that we can encounter. For example, someone who doesn't have an agenda or who's unfocused, and she has really interesting ways forward there. So I would recommend those for a beginning coach. It does require this outside view of the client rather than this collaborative one that we have in solution focus. But in order to be prepared for something that may happen when you're a beginning coach, I think these are helpful tips. Chapter 16 is really helpful tips for initial sessions. So she says it's really important to set the stage well, prepare the client for their first session, notice themes, and determine if you're a good match. And chapter 17 gives you a full sample of a laser focused session, coaching session, so you can see how this is going on or how this would happen in real life. So now for the evaluation. On the readability scale from 0 to 5 stars, I would give her 3.5 Kirsten points. The book is very readable. Short paragraphs, good summaries, and reflection questions at the end of every chapter. A lot of examples, real life coaching situations. I would say it's very readable. So maybe I'm making changing my mind. I'm going to give her 4 out of 5 Kirsten points. Academic rigor. Sadly, I can maybe give 2 Kirsten points. She does not mention her underlying assumption. Maybe it also wasn't the scope of this book. But as I said, I find it a little bit confused around, do we take the client seriously? Do we not take the client seriously? What is the exact stance of the coach? That's not mentioned. And then we also have this one example of mentioning studies that are not actually studies. So it's not entirely quote unquote bad, but I would give it on the academic rigor. It wasn't designed as an academic book, but on the academic rigor scale, I would give her 2 stars. And then on the practicality, I would give the book a whooping 5 Kirsten stars. It is very, very practical. And I think if you're not hung up on solution focus and narrative, if you're just about, if you want to pass master certified coach or a professional certified coach performance evaluation by the book, I would say do what Marion says, and you'll have a very, very high chance of passing. And you can see through the way that Marion is writing that she seems like a lovely person who's really interested in helping younger coaches to develop their own practice and their own presence in coaching. And the advice that she gives, I would say, apart from our little philosophical differences, is sound. So I would recommend, if you're interested in not very heavy practical read around coaching that is compliant with the regulations of the International Coaching Federation, go read The Heart of Laser-Focused Coaching. Don't buy into the theory, but buy into the practice.